So let's talk about Five Nights at Freddy's, possibly the most controversial movie in recent years due to its shameless ripping off of the 2016 masterpiece Five Nights at Freddy's the animated movie. Not to mention the rest of the franchise, since according to the description, this movie was written way before the first 4 games were released.
Man, when the judge pounded that gavel and sent Scott Cawthon to copyright jail, the fandom collectively cried out in agony. I mean, I was shocked. I've never seen a group of people so united over anything in my— So first of all, just in case you don't know who I am, which I don't know how that would be possible at this point due to my absolutely staggering subscriber count, but just in case, hello, my name is Lindsay, and I am honestly more of a movie critic than a FNAF fan. I gotta be transparent with y'all.
I'm just here for that sweet, sweet internet clout. Give me your clicks.
I knew a little bit going into this movie thanks to my friends who were very into FNAF a few years ago, but I feel like I fell a little bit more on the casual viewer side of things than the super fan. I wasn't peeing myself at the Easter eggs. I didn't even notice what was going on in the beginning credits the first time. That being said, I did do a lot of research before writing this video, so hopefully I can deal with this with some measure of understanding on both sides. So without further ado, let's get right into it. What is up with the FNAF movie? Was it good? Was it bad? Or was it accidentally genius? Let's find out.
Allow us to introduce ourselves.
I'll start off with an overview. The first time I watched this movie, I honestly expected it to be a lot worse than it was. Video game adaptations are typically not that great, and let's be honest, with the state of cinema nowadays, the smell of popcorn has practically become synonymous with disappointment. That's not to say I thought it was necessarily good, but there was something about it, some inexplicable charm that really had me enjoying myself. And I promise you we will get back to that, but I want to end on a positive. So first, let's go through my negative notes, and then we will end on why the FNAF movie was accidentally genius.
Hooray! That was great, Squidward. All those wrong notes you play made it sound more original.
The very first thing I noticed about this movie was that it didn't feel like a horror. A lot of people are saying there wasn't enough jump scares or tension for a movie based on a horror game, but for me it comes down to more than just the lack of scares. From the first scene, the locations were too well lit, the acting was too goofy, the situation was too easily explained, even with my limited knowledge of the franchise. I wasn't truly invested in the fate of this random dude because I already knew who and where he was and what was chasing him in like the first 2 frames. And I was genuinely wondering whether this was going to be a comedy just because of how over the top and silly he was acting. But the genres this movie supposedly is probably threw off a lot of critics because it's really more of a family drama, slightly a comedy at times, and the words horror mystery probably made them expect something a lot different from what they got. And speaking of, I don't know if I can even in good faith call this movie a mystery because the mystery of the whole thing wasn't even solved by the end, and as far as my research has taken me, I don't think it was solved for fans of the franchise either, since the timeline and characters are pretty different from how they are in the games. I guess all we can do is hope for a sequel to bring a bit more clarity to the situation because I'm still pretty confused as to why Afton was targeting Mike's family so much. I say this because as far as I've seen, Garrett isn't even a character in the games at all, and what with pretty much all of Mike's backstory down to early childhood being revealed in the movie and him having very little connection to the pizzeria, it seems unlikely that he would turn out to be Michael Afton. Like, that would be kind of a huge retcon at this point, but I could be missing something, so let me know what you guys think. My second note was that I felt like the relationship between Mike and Abby was very important to the emotional core of the film, and it could definitely have been presented better at the beginning of the movie. We didn't really get any positive interactions between the two of them at the beginning, and that's an issue because it makes their relationship come across as more like depressing than something we hope will get better. All it would have taken was one sweet little quip, but all we got was this teacher telling us about how Abby's pictures mean she actually loves him, and I had no reason to believe that because the only emotion Abby had shown towards him was annoyance. But I will say that by the end, I was more invested in their relationship because I feel like Mike's arc about learning to let go of the past was reasonably well done. And they did get some cute scenes near the end. I just wish they had baited that cuteness at the beginning more. And my final note was that even for those who knew very little about the franchise, the story was a bit predictable. I predicted that the career counselor guy was gonna turn out to be the main villain in my notes about a page before it happened, and it seems like a lot of other people did too, from what I've seen. There are a lot of things to nitpick about this movie, like a lot of people were saying the animatronics were underused. I personally was expecting a little bit more action from the animatronics, but I feel like if there had been too much, I would have just thought it was a lot of pandering and waved it off. So, and of course, everyone's confused about Vanessa's little "I will shoot you" outburst, but was anyone else thrown off by her spiel about Mike being suspicious? Like, it was weirdly rude, and she was being perfectly friendly before. I guess this is just a pattern for her. And now on to some more serious notes.
Charge of all that I see. All hail me.
This is the biggest thing that actively annoyed me about this movie. Not one of the villains, from the greedy aunt to the weird babysitter to William Afton himself, felt like real intimidating people. Pretty much all of the characters felt a little underdeveloped to me, but the villains really got the short end of the stick, and it shows. Aunt Jane is just so ridiculously one-dimensional. She shows no remorse at all for trying to ruin her own nephew's life. She honestly reminds me of a cartoon supervillain, just gleefully causing pain because she wants money, and I'm sorry, there may be greedy people in the world, but no one acts like this. And William Afton, who I have to say is the character who intrigues me most from the original lore, the way they presented him in the movie honestly feels like an insult to his very concept. William Afton is an incredibly nuanced character in lore, and in the movie, absolutely none of that was translated on screen. He again becomes a cartoon supervillain, giving a dumb, watered-down monologue. I'm feeling none of his tragedy, I'm feeling none of his torture, and when he sticks a knife into his daughter, it has none of the punch that any of his actions in the original series did, in my opinion. Because instead of being motivated by a tangible, tragic event in his past and by very visceral human emotions, it's just something he does because he's the villain, and villains don't care about their children, right? He was just trying too hard to be intimidating, the way he talked was nothing like how a real person would talk, and he was frankly too easily pushed into a corner, and half of his screen time was just him acting like a scared rabbit, which didn't make me very scared of him, unfortunately. The casting of Matthew Lillard seems like it was a divisive choice. Like, I've seen people on both sides thinking it was a genius decision and thinking it just didn't work. Unfortunately, I am in the latter camp. Sorry, Matthew, the goofiness did not do it for me. But there is a way that the goofiness of these villains might have actually helped the movie. So now let's talk about what was accidentally genius about it.
How dare you! The Fire Nation took my mother away from me.
The cultural context surrounding this movie has created something quite unlike anything I've ever seen before. That being a movie with such a weird filmic world that it becomes almost comical, and it's honestly quite enjoyable to watch. Now, we're all aware that the indie horror genre, starting with the FNAF franchise, has become quite watered down in the past few years. And of course, that would be because the fan base has been overrun by young children. And that young audience clearly had an effect on the production of this movie for obvious reasons, but I think it also had a deeper effect on the development of the characters. Kids like to watch adult movies, and even kid movies that appeal to adults, and that's because those things feel smarter to them, and they can pick up on that. When they watch something smart, they feel smart, and that's what I feel like they were going for with Josh Hutcherson's character. Mike is supposed to be the nuanced one in this movie. He has a whole thing going on with his brother, and he's dealing with all this crap from his aunt, losing his parents. I mean, this man practically has every angsty backstory trope known to man, and Hutcherson acts the part accordingly. He's always sighing, leaning on fences, and staring at nothing while the pharmacist prepares his medication. It's painful. But there's also other things that children like to watch, and one of those things is silly, goofy villains with motivations that don't make any sense. And so, in an effort to appeal to both of these sides of their audience, the movie created two types of characters that contradict each other so much that it feels almost like satire levels of contrast. And that's what made Mike so fun for me to watch. In any other movie, a character this unabashedly angsty would be funny, sure, but set up against these villains that have absolutely no nuance and just act so outlandishly silly for no reason, he becomes that much more hilarious. There are gripes that I have with Mike, like how he honestly just seemed to be manipulative to people throughout. Like, he tried to guilt trip Abby into eating, and then he even tried to get out of criminal negligence charges by telling Vanessa his mom died, which works. But I don't mind those things so much. I honestly just want to preserve the unique atmosphere of this movie. It is its own brand of bad and accidentally genius, and actually, I kind of love it for that. Let me know what you guys all thought of it in the comments, and while you're there, somebody tell me what the deal is with the exotic butters. I still don't understand this. Now let's talk about the real FNAF movie. Five Nights at Freddy's, the animated movie, takes place in Five Nights at Freddy's, a pizzeria where 5 children were kidnapped, and 3 strangers are now trying to solve the mystery of where the children were kidnapped to, and they gather at the place where the children were kidnapped to find out what happened to the 6 kidnapped children, and that place was the pizzeria from where the children were kidnapped. The lack of dialogue in the first few scenes is genius. I hate dialogue. Dialogue should be retired entirely, in my opinion. Every movie should give all its information through heavy-handed narration that continues even after the person giving it has died. I hate well-motivated narration that cleverly increases the tension in a scene. This movie is peak. Man, the tension was palpable as she slowly moves the flashlight around looking for decaying animatronics. I was on the edge of my seat when she held up her gun below the elbow and calmly shot into Freddy's chest. It was the most gripping scene. Ooh, it's so interesting and not boring at all when the main character solves the mystery in her head, and then instead of having an arc where she learns to accept that answer, she just shrugs her shoulders and gives the animatronics a pep talk. Man, I hate good character arcs. I cried so hard when Jeremy decided to heroically sacrifice his life so that Lucy could escape the facility, and then he got saved and then died again. It was so sweet of him that his last wishes were to comfort his client instead of to send any message to any family members he may have had, because obviously they're not important. What a good detective. I wish all people in real life were that dedicated to their jobs. Did I mention that I love climaxes that pull plot threads out of vague family drama that was poorly explained in the beginning so that you can barely keep track of who is who by the end? They're so much more satisfying to watch than a climax that was built up over the course of the movie. In fact, I hate continuity. Oh, Lizzie!
Don't worry, you're just paralyzed.
Not to mention the entire last sequence being a flashback after the entire plot has already played out, so there's no tension whatsoever. All flashbacks should be purely informational exposition added after the fact, just in case for the viewers who missed something. My only complaint against this movie is that it has no credits, so I can't give my due admiration to the geniuses who crafted this absolute masterpiece of a film. I have a shrine in my bedroom to Secret Force Studio. If you're watching this, know that you're my hero, and I look forward to the day when the FNAF animated movie gets its theatrical release and proves that it is the real FNAF.